Welcome to the podcast, Chris Graham and Rod Mullins. We're going to talk NASCAR and we're going to focus on the first playoff race. We've got our first ticket punched for the round of 12, and we've also got some guys who got some work to do after some crashes that knocked some of our contenders out of the race yesterday. Hey, Rod, let's start with maybe Joey Logano, the big winner, and he is the first to punch his ticket. Good race for him, and after a tough 2023, he's at least sailing through this first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, and a tough beginning of the year too in 2024 because a lot of people were left scratching their head, wondering, what's up with Joey Logano? What's up with this team? Because they were mired back. I mean, finishing as far back as in the 20s, even finishing almost close to dead last sometimes in some of the races. But he has found a way to rebound, and he has already won one race on the season. And then Atlanta this weekend, it could have been a Daniel Suarez sweep because Daniel Suarez won the race in the spring, comes back and makes at least a good effort to try to go and pull off the win on Sunday afternoon. But, Joey Logano had some help from his teammate, Ryan Blaney, and that's what really helped him get across the start finish line.
Kyle Larson knocked out of the race when he got loose, I guess, and Chase Briscoe and him had a collision. They were both actually knocked out. This, I mean, Larson was number one seed in the playoffs. This is not a good way to start.
This hurts. This is like a paper cut. I mean, this is just one of those things of where if you've ever had a paper cut, it's raw and it still continues to be raw for a period of time. And I'm sure that Kyle Larson is probably looking at this. I don't know if Chase Briscoe is looking at it as much as Kyle Larson is. Denny Hamlin's also looking at it too, because Denny Hamlin has talked a lot as the season has progressed about how important it is for the team to come together and be there when they need to be there down the playoff stretch. Well, already we've gone through the first race, and Denny Hamlin does not finish in very good position for him to be able to pull something off. Right now, he's on the fringe. He's on that bubble. If the playoffs were to end and he has another bad performance, especially at Watkins Glen or something, he's out. He could be out. He could be on the outside looking in. Same thing goes for Kyle Larson too. I don't know what happened. I don't know if you saw the wreck yesterday, but Kyle Larson, wow, I don't know how he came out of that in one piece because man, all of a sudden the car just broke away and then shot up the racetrack, hit the wall. And they talked to him and he said, I'm okay, but still, it was a hard hit yesterday. Denny Hamlin, of course, gets collected toward the end of the race, gets caught up in the melee there toward the end of the race on the overtime period, but still not a good performance for Denny Hamlin altogether. And also what happened to Kyle Larson yesterday.
You talk about paper cuts. I had a paper cut a couple weeks ago. I'm on a blood thinner, and this paper cut. I mean, I'll hold my finger. It was. You can barely even see. There's still a little bit of scratching. Man, with a blood thinner, a paper cut, it was like a murder scene.
Yep.
So those
All
paper
over
cuts
the place.
all over the place, and then like 2 or 3 days later, it hadn't quite healed. So, like you said, a paper cut can continue to hurt you because a couple days later, I did something, and all of a sudden, blah, it was another murder scene. So, yeah, those paper cuts can come back and get you. As far as that goes. Let's see who else to talk about here. What else as far as the playoff field goes, I guess, in terms of the impact here, because I know that everybody's in the field, even the non-playoff drivers still are racing their races, but our focus has to be there. Who else was hurt yesterday, and maybe who else gained yesterday in terms
Well,
of playoff positioning?
Well, looking at this, Brad Keselowski, Harrison Burton, Martin Truex, they were also hurt too. And I think it hurt Martin Truex probably the worst, along with Chase Briscoe, probably more than anybody else. This was the thing that really was the point that put these guys on the bubble, so to speak. Ty Gibbs managed to salvage this, and he managed to at least gain one position and get up to the 12th position. But some of this stuff might be too little too late, is the way the teams are going, because here they are. They're stuck in this situation. Chase Elliott is in eighth. Here's a surprise. Alex Bowman. They had already started talking this past week about Alex Bowman, and the rumor had gotten started again. Jeff Gordon has already said, no, it's not going to happen. I don't even want to talk about this. But the rumor had got started that Hendrick was going to bring Kyle Busch back to Hendrick Motorsports to race in the 48 car. And Jeff Gordon said, no, that's not going to happen right now at this point. And I don't address things like this, but it seems like that when somebody starts talking about Austin or Alex Bowman's future and where he's going to be at, he suddenly steps up to the plate and he delivers for Hendrick Motorsports. So he's kind of a guy that I don't want to see them get rid of. He's kind of been hanging around there, so to speak, toward the front and the top of the middle of the pack. But I just don't want to see them go and cut him loose because he's got a lot of potential. He's got a great amount of potential as a driver. I mean, won the Chicago race. I mean, won the race there, the street race and so forth. And then what else do you do? Do you go and do you slap the man while he's down? No, this guy's not even down yet. This guy is still in the hunt. He's in sixth place, middle of the pack. Where can he go but up, except for if he has a couple of bad races and then he could go to the bubble and then completely out of the playoff picture. But I don't see that happening with Alex Bowman.
Of the non-playoff guys, thought it'd be worth talking about because we talked about how Kyle Busch had been running so well of late. He finished second, a close second, a couple times as the regular season was coming to an end, and he was on the cusp of making the playoffs with a win in either of those
Right.
races. He finished seventh yesterday.
Mhm.
He's a guy that, man, if he'd have snuck his way in, he'd be in the mix right now.
This team has come to life, so to speak. We've talked about this, especially in the last 4 to 5 weeks. This team is, and it took, I think, a meeting at Richard Childress Racing, and it's kind of like one of those things we used to talk about when the band director or the football coach is going to get after you. It's one of those come to Jesus talks. And this is what happened. And I mean, Andy Petrie, he retired, he got out. I don't know if that was holding him back. We're back to that same thing again. It seemed to change the season for Kyle Busch. Now, Austin Dillon, he's kind of still just sitting there. He's not, made a great deal of, some steps. Of course, that big win at Richmond, but then, what did they do to him? Knocked him out of the playoffs with it and so forth. But this is a team I think that's starting to get some things right, and they're building for next year. Just hope that they don't build for next year and then suddenly the bottom goes out of it again like it did this past year.
So Bush led 24 laps. Looking at some of the non-playoff guys who led laps, Ross Chastain led 13, finished 13th.
Mm-hmm.
Looking down at Bubba Wallace, he finished 29th, but he led 8 laps. So,
Yeah.
some of these guys who were on the cusp ran well, at least for times, parts of this race, and then maybe just petered out. So that's a factor that's so interesting. We've talked about this in years past, Rod. To me, it's so interesting that unlike in other sports, if you don't make the playoffs in football, you don't get to keep playing and impact the guys who are in the playoffs. But here in NASCAR, yeah, the teams, the drivers who are not in the playoffs can actually, impact what happens with the playoff race. That's just so unique to NASCAR.
Yeah, it is. And I think, here's one thing that kind of came out this past weekend that I think a lot of people were surprised about. Bubba Wallace made a comment that when young Bubba, this little Bubette or whatever is coming on the way and so forth, him and his wife, he may step away from the sport because to him, there's more important things in life. And, in one way, I can't blame him because, 36 races, you're going to be traveling most of the season, most of the year and stuff. And you're going to be doing promotional work. You want to see that child grow up. Kyle Larson or Kyle Busch rather, and Kyle Larson and some of the other dads in the sport, Kevin Harvick is another example. They've gotten their kids involved in the racing. Now, this may be something that Bubba Wallace wants to do in the future, but I don't see it happening immediately. You're not going to go and put them in their Pampers and put them in a little car and start running them around the block with it. But I just think that he is kind of looking at the point of view of, hey, there's more important things in life than just racing, and I want to raise a child. And so, more power to him if that's what he wants to do. He's kind of been struggling as of late. And when I say struggling, he's struggling with this, as I call it, sort of a mental thing. It's a kind of a mental, well, best described as he said about mental illness. He's talked about it and things about the depression, about, all these different things of going on in his life. I think it's grabbed him. I think it's grabbed him in a lot of ways, and it's kind of bringing him back to reality of what he has to do, that there's more to it than just being the top front runner in a race all the time.
I think about that a lot with athletes and maybe entertainers and other people in the spotlight too. It's not easy being in the spotlight. It's not easy because when you're doing what you're doing and you're out, either if you're a musician on tour, you're an actor in a TV series or in movies, if you're an athlete, you got to dedicate yourself to that 100%. You're on the road a lot. You have crazy hours. You don't work 9 to 5 Monday through Friday and sleep at home and that kind of thing very often anyway. And it's tough. And I would even throw in it's probably maybe a slight bit tougher for a guy like Bubba Wallace, the only black driver in an all-white sport. There's probably some extra pressure there, and then yeah, on top of the fact there are so many expectations for him, and he hasn't quite lived up to them yet. So there's so many things going in there that can make it tough for even the most mentally stable person in the world. I don't think too many of us actually are as mentally strong as we think we are. It's tough living in the world we live in. So
Yeah.
yeah, I can see that with him and with really with anybody in sports that, at some point you might say, is this all worth it?
Yeah, and I think we all put a little bit too much pressure on ourselves about things. I know that I have. I put pressure on myself about the classroom and about teaching and so forth. And I've taken a step away from it. I'm just kind of hanging out here right now and stuff, and kind of doing some things that I've wanted to do. But it's the mental health part of it is um, constantly, and going back to the teaching part of it, it's this way with everything that you're involved in. It's staying on SOLs, making sure that your kids are going to be attendance wise. Some of the school systems right now and stuff are fighting with this thing about attendance and so forth, and keeping these kids there and in school and everything, and it falls on the teacher. And unfortunately, the teacher takes a lot of it personally, takes it to heart, and they blame themselves for it if they fail or if something happens. And I've kind of stepped away from that, and I'm sure Bubba Wallace has felt that too, because he knows he's a better driver than what we see week in and week out. There's a lot of different factors that come into this thing of is the crew chief ready, is the team ready, is the car ready, is all these different things, is everything going to come together for that lightning in the bottle moment that's going to put him into victory lane in the winner's circle. That's the way it is week in and week out in racing. It's that way in baseball, it's that way in football. Can you imagine how much pressure is going to be on our wonderful quarterback from the New York Jets tonight, who's going to be stepping in, playing the game tonight against the 49ers? And, I wouldn't want to be him right now because, he's kind of weird anyway on some things and stuff. I don't think his mental state is going to be the best if he goes out on the first play like he did, what, a year ago, and then, messes himself up and doesn't play the rest of the season.
No,
So
now give him credit. He made it 4 plays last year before he
4 plays.
went out for the
Okay.
season. He made it 4 plays. Yeah.
Made it
No,
4 plays.
you're exactly right. No, it's tough. Hey, let's as we're wrapping up this segment here, let's talk about Watkins Glen. I love that this track is on the circuit for the playoffs. It's a challenging track. What do you look forward to this weekend?
Watkins Glen is going to be an all-out war, is what it's going to be, and I think all these guys know it. Um, Chase Elliott was talking about it. They've got to be on top of their game coming up this weekend when they go to Watkins Glen. They have to be on top of their game. Um, you know, you've got Ryan Blaney the same way. I mean, Ryan Blaney, although you look at him, and I'm looking here right quickly at the point standings the way it is. Joey Logano is in first right now in the point standings in the playoffs, with Ryan Blaney second, Christopher Bell's third, Tyler Reddick is fourth, William Byron is fifth. Anything could happen to these guys. Tyler Reddick loves a road course. Tyler Reddick may end up being the next one that jumps into that, the thing of 12, the field of 12 by the time that they roll around. And then the cutoff is at Bristol coming up in about 2 weeks. Chase Elliott has been good on road courses before, but we haven't really seen Chase Elliott do too much this season. I mean, he's won one race, but still, we've not seen, I think, the full potential out there for what Chase Elliott could do. Daniel Suarez is another. Daniel Suarez, matter of fact, is one of the drivers right now that they've mentioned that's really hot. He's started picking up. He's picking up the pace and has been holding, with at least finishes in the top 10, top 15. Give him credit. He's one that needs to be looked at as well. And I certainly don't want to rule out Ty Gibbs out of it, but you've got drivers like Denny Hamlin right now, Kyle Larson, who loves a road course, loves anything, but it's almost like the Sports Illustrated curse. And that is Kyle Larson was bragged about as being the greatest race car driver ever. And he's only finished in the top 10 in one race, and that's Darlington. And that's been in the last 5 weeks since that announcement was made. So it's kind of like a curse. And, he's got to break the curse, whether it's carry a Cupid doll or whatever, a voodoo doll or whatever it is in his car with him and stick it as he goes by whoever might be his opponent to knock him out of the points. He's going to have to do something. He and especially Denny Hamlin are going to have to come up with something. Watkins Glen is probably the track that will be able to get them back on top of things if everything goes okay.
Well, Rod, we'll look forward to your coverage of the race this weekend. And until we talk again next week, thank you for your time and your insight.
Appreciate it, Chris. Thank you.